I'll get my water. Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for coming. Okay, it's a very warm day, unless you really like this kind of weather. Okay, and Mark hears me complain. This is Flash, by the way, the fellow I refer to as Flash, Mark Carney. He always hears me complain. I'm too hot in the summer. I'm too cold in the winter. I am impossible to please. And as Jan said, I write Common Sense at 60. The only problem is I'm going to be 70 in April. So I don't know whether I'm going to call it a day or whether I'm going to have to change it to Common Sense at 70 or whether I'll have any common sense left at dinner. I don't know. But anyway, thank you so much for coming. And how many of you have read my column in the Sioux News? Okay, a few of you already. I've been writing for about 2.5 years. So I'll try to read some of the stuff that's a little bit older. I started my writing career when I was quite young, but I didn't do anything with it. Probably 30, 35 years ago. I always wanted to write, and I had all these stories in my head about a little kid called Katie, who wasn't really me, but she lived on a farm, and she had some siblings, and lived with her grandmother and whatnot. And eventually I may turn Katie into a series of children's stories, because she's always ready to go. And I'm so tired of her. Hi, come on in.
Sorry.
Oh, no, glad to see you, glad to see you. But poor old Katie has been in my mind for many, many years. And as I say, that may be children's stories, but it kind of runs towards her problem with Catholicism as a young girl growing up in the 50s with the fire and brimstone priest. So the audience might be a little bit limited. But anyway, when I was in my early 50s, I thought, well, what do I do? You know, I can't be a stay-at-home mother anymore. My child is gone, so I don't have that excuse. And I didn't really know. I was one of those baby boomers. Now, I never did drugs. I never did alcohol. They didn't burn my bra because I was too busy earning money to pay for my bra. Okay, so I wasn't out there with, Gloria Steinem and the rest of the gals. But I never knew what I wanted to do, because I thought as a girl growing up, I could be a nun, I could be a secretary, I could be a nurse, and what was the fourth one? A teacher. Bingo, okay, somebody else knows it. Well, sick people made me sick, so that took care of that. My sister became the nurse, okay? I got over my nun phase when I was 7 and fell in love with the boy who sat next to me in first grade. Okay, so that took care of that. What was the other one? Teaching, when in 1968, a fellow from Lake State said, English teachers are a dime a dozen, you'll never get a job. So I was a country girl, I believed him. I said, okay, I'll get a liberal arts degree in nothing. Okay, so I was qualified to do nothing, so naturally, I became a secretary. And I could type like a whiz, alrighty? And that lasted on and off until I had a child, then I was a stay-at-home mom, so at 52 or whatever it was, 52, 54, I thought, well, I have my bachelor's since 1974, I want to see if there's any gray matter left. And there was a little bit left, so I took a poetry class, a 2-week poetry class up at Northern, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I realized that, yeah, I could do this. So then I was teaching out at Bay Mills Community College as an English comm. And I would commute twice a week to Northern. And I thought, well, I either have to quit for the winter, because I'm not going to drive that far in the wintertime, or live up on campus. So for 6 months, I lived on graduate housing on campus, and I loved it. It was absolutely wonderful. So at 54, I got my master's. And through the help of friends, sight unseen, I was hired at Lake State as an adjunct. And that was great. That was great. But at the same time, I was a substitute teacher, which, if any of you have subbed, if you're 54, 55 years old and you start subbing, you might as well hang it up. I mean, there is absolutely no connection. There was no connection between me and the students. So, I mean, I had to duck, erasers, spitballs, no tomatoes. But I got called down to the principal's office more times than the kids. Because I didn't know that you couldn't tell them to sit down and shut up. And that's the truth. I was down in Brimley especially, and then in Sioux, sometimes I would sub at the middle school, and that was like a combat zone. Okay? So I thought, okay, I'm 60, 61, 2, 3, finally at 66, I thought, well, I'll start a blog. Okay, doesn't everybody blog nowadays? So I started a blog, but I had no followers. So I thought, well, that doesn't work. What should I do now? I thought, I know. I'll go down to the newspaper and see if the new editor could maybe use some of my stuff. So I went down, and I had a couple that I just, torn off, and they were really short. And I said, well, I'm so-and-so, I'm local, would you like some of this stuff? He looked at it. He said, we'll run you twice a week. I said, well, now what do I do? I don't have any material. This stuff is real short. Okay, so I went home and I started writing. And this is what I ended up with. I realized at 66 there is a story everywhere. There's a story about that empty frame over there with the, the invisible picture looking at us. There's a story with the lady with the pretty pink stripes on. There's another story with the beautiful lady in the hair who's sitting next to the very happy-looking gentleman. There's a story back there with the young man with the yellow shirt on. All these ladies. Everybody has a story. The difference between those who write and those who just think about their stories is that ability to put pen to paper. So if you want to leave something for your children, your grandchildren, your enemies, whatever, just sit down and start writing. I used to tell my students, aim low and you're bound to succeed. Okay? I taught developmental students for a while, and they're all kind of scared, and they don't like English, so my first question would be, how many of you like English? And it was total silence. I said, great. No longer again will you ever be able to speak, because you were speaking the English language. And they realized then, I used to say to them, you don't talk like this, okay, you put in commas, exclamation points, question marks. And so I brought it to a level they could understand, and that's what I try to do with this. I try to write stories that are 450 or 460 words long. As I'm getting older, I'm finding that I'm adding words to it. And so far the editor hasn't said snip, snip, snip. But I find that if they're short and most people can relate to them, it's a winner. So I'm going to just, that's my story. And I'm going to tell you how the tin can came about to be called the tin can. Okay, I call this one the christening. A few nights ago, the thought occurred to me as I waited for sleep to overtake my teeming brain that my life had shrunk to the size of a pea. I'm not sure when the shrinking process began, and I have no idea how it will end, but shrink my life has. I suppose living in a tin can has something to do with it. Now, I hate to do this, but I forgot to put on my reading glasses. I can't see anything. That's almost memorized. So here we go. Okay. My folks purchased this Marlette trailer in August of 1968. My sister Jude was married and living in Sault Ste. Marie. I married and moved to Colorado Springs, and my brother Ed enlisted in the Army and was Vietnam bound. Mom decided it was time to evacuate the old house and move into a beautiful, brand new mobile home. Everything went smoothly until the snow arrived. That's when Dad christened this place the Tin Can. My parents had always heated with wood. Although our old house was like an open shed during the winter nights, when the wood stove was going, we could count on steady heat throughout the day. Dad's first encounter with an oil furnace is what prompted his nickname for the Marlette. He simply couldn't get used to the idea of 1 minute being warm and the next being cold. He told Mom they were living in a tin can. Remove the heat source, and the place was as icy as a tomb and a thorough disappointment. Mom said that was okay. She told him to crank up the thermostat as high as he liked. Eventually, Dad got used to trailer life, but he would not call it home. In his eyes, it remained the tin can, and that's how I refer to it today. East and west do not exist in my world, for the length of the trailer runs north and south. Sometimes I consider this place a refuge, a fortress, a place to reflect on the day's events, and other times it is a sentence. I wasn't supposed to end up in a tin can, but sometimes you end up in the wackiest places through a grotesque twist of fate. The other day, I told my sailor friend, Flash, that I was languishing. The word sounded appropriate as it fell from my lips, but Flash, he laughed. Later that evening, I laughed too. What a fancy word to describe my state. I'm not languishing like some of you. I'm just bored. So for those of you who wonder why I compiled my newspaper column into this book, the answer is simple. I'm not quite ready to expire. I often tell my daughter Stephanie, you never know what's coming. Something wonderful could be waiting for you right around the corner. All you have to do is turn it. So if any of you have any ideas, okay, that you're unhappy with your life, you're bored with your life, you're angry with your life, turn the corner. Because you never know. Could be something good, could be something absolutely horrible, but you can always go back, I suppose. Oh, you don't have to do that. You have to, because that was pathetic. If you're the only one who's going to clap, I'm going home, I'll tell you that. I got one here. I got lots of them, but where's this one here? How about the irrelevance of oldsters? Most of us are over 50, right? Right? Okay. Do you ever feel or get the feeling that you're invisible? The aging process seems to take us in one of two directions. Either we're treated with respect and admiration, or we're ignored and considered irrelevant relics of the 20th century. Just ask Hillary. The worst part is we allow it to happen because we feel there's nothing we can do about it. And maybe there isn't. But maybe there is. One look at the person who used to be Bruce Jenner should convince us there's plenty we can do to make our last years the best. Now, most of us wouldn't go as far as reconstructive surgery, okay? But what's to stop us from getting in touch with our inner selves? Kids do it on a daily basis. They experiment with all sorts of things, like body piercings, colorful tattoos, and earrings to exaggerate their earlobes. I don't see any of those big black things in anybody's ears, so I'm safe. So where do we start? It's challenging to turn over a new leaf when we're comfortable with the old one. As we hobble towards old age, we may not want to change and get in step with the modern world. Outwardly, we look one way, but inwardly, where no one sees, we feel another way. We're still young inside us. We don't need piercing, tattoos, or earlobes the size of cabbages. To a nation obsessed with youth, we probably appear as leftovers from the dinosaur age. We might even bear a slight resemblance to one, but that's only on the outside. Visit any casino on senior day, and the truth about us oldsters is obvious. We come in all shapes and sizes. We don't give a hoot about the opinion of youngsters, and we can spend our retirement check any way we want. We might be irrelevant, but we're not stupid. We know life is only a jigsaw puzzle with missing pieces, and there's no point in moaning over the unfairness of it. That's just the way it is. The young don't appreciate their youth because they think it will last forever. They look at folks advanced in years and say to themselves, I'll never look like that. But we know differently. No matter how often they diet and exercise or how much money they spend on plastic surgery, age will eventually get them. They can erase years from their face, but their hands will betray them.
That's right.
So smile the next time youngsters glance your way and frown. You know perfectly well what's in store for them. Give them a few decades and their youthful glow will fade, their shoulders will slump, and the pep in their step will be replaced by a shuffle in their orthopedic shoes. Time is the indiscriminate equalizer that makes everything irrelevant. And isn't that just about the truth?
Yep.
If any of you have youngsters, you know, well, of course it's different now, but in the old days, when my aunts were like in their 40s, you know, I thought they were 90. You know, I mean, people have changed so much. There was one that I wanted to read for the fellas. I thought, this is for you guys. Okay? Now, we only have 2 in here. And ladies, this, you know, I love all of you. Don't forget Flash.
We got 3.
Story of my life.
Talk about irrelevant. I'm so sorry.
That works.
Go ahead.
Thank you for reminding me. You'll take
Ready for that.
I don't want to insult any women in here, but this one is called The One That Got Away. Why is it when fellas come back from fishing, it's always the one that got away they talk about? They brag about the size of the fish and how hard they struggled to keep it on the hook. One would think they're looking for sympathy, but how can you feel sorry for a 200-pound man who can't wrestle a 10-pound fish? Okay, I've never taken a fishing rod down the road to the river, so maybe I don't understand because I haven't been there. Mind you, I'm not talking about deep sea fishing. I imagine that's a totally different sport from rowing your boat to a favorite spot and waiting for the big one to bite. I'm thinking of your average angler who enjoys spending a few hours on a calm lake on a humid August day. I imagine fishing is a great way to temporarily escape the stress of a nagging spouse, ungrateful kids, and all those weekend chores. I have a feeling, call it intuition or just plain common sense, that when a fellow is alone in his boat, he does a little more than fishing. He does some thinking, too. Perhaps he thinks about the tasty meal he'll enjoy once he reels in the perch. He could be thinking about the Friday night poker game and the fish stories the guys will swap. Or maybe, just maybe, his thoughts turn to the gal who got away. Don't say a word, guys. Don't say a word. We've all been there, especially if you're a little older. Once you're past 60, you've probably been there 2 or 3 times. I'm way, way past 60, and I've watched some good catches swim in the opposite direction. I guess I just didn't have the right bait. Sitcoms often portray men as shallow, heartless, non-communicative slugs. Television wives seem to bring 2 rings to the altar. One goes around the husband's finger and the other through his nose. I hope not. I wonder when a men's lib movement will surface and gents will demand the respect and appreciation they deserve. On TV, males are humiliated in front of their children and often dismissed as a disagreeable nuisance by their wives. If the picture I paint has even a hint of truth to it, either on TV or in real life, who can blame a fellow for taking his boat and rowing as far from shore as possible? Oh, the pleasure of your own company, the delight in peace and quiet, the enchantment of what might have been. Who cares if the fishing is poor? The illusion of the one that got away is probably just that, but sometimes it takes an illusion to get us through the day. You know, I often think about, because I wrote this for a friend of mine, who had a crush on a girl from the time she was in high school. And every time he sees this gal, he says, "Oh, I love you, honey. I love you, honey." Now, mind you, he never dated her but once. He has never socialized with her, okay? But he still, when he sees her at a yard sale or at the casino, oh, he'll sneak, run away from the wife and say, "I love you, honey. I love you." To this day, I still tell him, "I love you too, honey. I love you too." And that's the truth. He has this fixation of this 16-year-old girl, But, all right, what do you guys want to hear now? We got a few more minutes here. Everybody get tired? You want to stretch? You want to, what do we want to do?
Go on.
A little bit more? A little bit more? I got one here. This is rushing it. Oh, well, this one. My dad only bought one new car in his life. And I don't know if any of you read this one, but you can just about imagine what it was. I call this one "Unsafe at Any Speed." Really? In his lifetime, as far as I know, Dad purchased only one new car. As luck would have it, it was a Corvair. The car made infamous by that consumer watchdog rascal, Ralph Nader. I remember the day Dad drove that beautiful white vehicle down our lane. We waited on the front porch while he parked it. Then we ran like rats to examine it. What I recall most is the delicious new car aroma, although I can't stand the smell of plastic in new cars of today. In 1960, the fragrance was intoxicating. The gray seats were as slick as a toboggan run, and everything was perfect. The radio worked, the windshield had no cracks, and with a minimum amount of effort, the windows cranked up and down. According to an entry in an old diary, I was even impressed by the heater that actually threw out heat. If you remember the old days. Okay, Mom didn't have a driver's license. Oh, well, wait a minute. Well, this is not really big. We piled in for a ride, but there was no stopping for ice cream cones or hamburgers at Dorothy's. Mom declared eating in the car was absolutely forbidden. My siblings and I agreed, knowing perfectly well that rule wouldn't last longer than a week. Now, Mom didn't have a driver's license, but such a minor snag didn't hinder her from driving our old car to the mailbox at the end of the side road. Once she mastered the Corvair stick shift, there was no stopping her. She never ventured to Sault Ste. Marie, but she was no stranger to 6 Mile Road as she zoomed to Drager's store in Brimley. Well, maybe zoomed is taking poetic license. I'm sure Mom crept along, keeping a sharp eye out for the sheriff. If I remember correctly, we didn't have that fancy Corvair very long. I rechecked my diary to see if I could find when and why the vehicle vanished, but no such entry was worthy. Event was worthy of an entry. If my sister Jude was still with us, she could have given me chapter and verse on every detail regarding that car. She had an amazing memory and a phenomenal eye for detail. She passed away in 2014, and although her gift of gab often drove me crazy, and she was pure Irish. She was a trivia encyclopedia. As it is, the Corvair experiment is dependent upon my pencil scribblings and a story I wrote years ago. 2 lines read like this. I run my hands along the Corvair's body, and for the first time ever, I'm not afraid of getting cut on rust. The car drives like a team of fresh horses pulling together. Nader might have been right about safety, but he didn't know a thing about a kid's delight in a new car. And what happened to that car, I don't remember, but I do remember that my cousin, who was, I don't know how old I wasn't very old, he was 10 years up on me, so he was probably in his 20s, and Mom didn't want to drive to town, so Jim drove us to town. And the Corvair, the engine was in the back, okay, the trunk was in the front, and the shift was different from what Jim was used to. So he did whatever, you men would know that. What do you do when you ruin it by putting it in the wrong gear?
Strip the transmission.
Okay, who said that?
Me.
It didn't come from a man, did it? No, men, they have no idea. They're thinking about the one that got away. What are we going to do with them, ladies? He stripped the gears or whatever, and I think then Dad kind of said, well, I don't know, but we didn't have it for very long at all, but it was a doozy. Okay, Mark, you're doing a real good job. Okay. Can you endure another one?
Yeah.
Okay? We got a little bit longer? I want to read this one. The Princess Cake was just in not too long ago. I don't know if you folks read it or not. I got to go to my holidays. How to end an argument. I like that one. If you don't know what to say something stupid. That's what my aunt always used to do. When they'd be going for a drive. Oh, the ticks are back. I won't bother with that one. The friendship cake craze. A shock to the system. And then I have some serious ones in here. Like Memorial Day, I talk about that. Mother's Day, I talk about that. They tell me it's spring, the wearing of the green. But I'm looking for this one. I thought I had marked it. D-Day lottery, Father's Day with Dad. I'm coming to it. Bait and snitch. Somebody had asked me, a fellow called me from Brimley, and he said, I don't like it when they bait deer, okay? And I knew my father wouldn't have liked that, okay? You want to hear about bait and snitch? This I wrote for a fellow, as I say, an older gentleman from Brimley. I said, deer hunting is in full swing with bows, rifles, and muzzle loaders getting their yearly workout. If hunters miss their kill on the first try, there's always another weapon season to guarantee venison for the winter. What amazes me is how much hunting has changed since I was young. I remember icy cold November mornings when my uncles and cousins gathered around our kitchen table and argued over who would stand watch and where. The young fellows knew their place. They were the hounds, and it fell to them to drive the deer through the forest. It didn't matter if the snow was deep or the going was rough. They were spry and ready for the job. There was pride involved in chasing deer into a clearing where an older relative waited. Although I never went with the hounds, I heard them boasting when they returned to our house. It didn't matter if a deer had been shot. The important thing was the hounds had done their duty. They had driven the animal out, and if it wasn't downed, it wasn't their fault. They still had bragging rights. A heated blind or a comfortable easy chair on the back porch would have been as foreign to them as a pile of sugar beets or carrots. Men would have been disgusted at the lack of sport involved in the baiting practice. It doesn't require much skill to shoot deer within 2-foot range. Dad would have said it was cruel to bait an animal and deny it a fighting chance. He had a heart as soft as spun sugar. He hunted with the other men. but I think it was more for the stories than the kill. Old-timers were a tough lot. Each wore a plaid woolen jacket, pants, and hat. The green rubber boots probably didn't offer much heat, but the men were hardy. They spent hours out in the cold. I don't recall anyone complaining about the elements, but they were glad when fresh snow made tracking easier. They hunted in our woods as well as the property of my uncles on our side road. The maple tree in our front yard served as a showcase for the men's efforts. It wasn't unusual for 3 or 4 deer to hang from the branches. Freezing temperatures protected the meat. After the men bragged and snapped enough pictures to fill an album, the deer were lowered and butchered. As hunters of today cannot boast about the one they shot while it ate bait, so too men of yesterday kept quiet about the doe in the woodshed. However, there was a huge difference in how each animal was brought down. One required skill, the other only sugar beets. And I was sure I would get some flack, because everybody baits now, But I remember the days early in the morning they'd come, and there was always snow in November. There was always a lot of snow, and the men had those red, heavy woolen, things on. And they got wet, they got cold. I mean, it didn't matter. They were out there for the fun of it. Well, because we never ate venison. As a matter of fact, our kitchen table was quite long, and there was a bench against the wall. And that's where my sister and I sat, facing the wood stove. We didn't want to look out the window because we'd see the deer swinging there. Oh, I didn't like that. I just, even my dad was funny. He was a farmer, and we had dairy cows, and we had beef cattle, but the pigs, I wrote one in here too about the pigs. When my sister started to name everything, of course we named the cows, but when she started to name the pigs, 'cause I was the house cat, she was the outdoor girl, Dad said, that's it, we are not going to eat Porky. Okay. So he gave up on the pigs. Okay. Dad, I don't know how he put up with this. He was funny. Okay. Here's one about cast your votes. There's a little bit of everything. The dichotomy of Thanksgiving, how, we all think it's going to be great, and it ain't always, Norman Rockwell Thanksgiving. Okay, the guy, everybody gets drunk sometimes. They fight over who wants to watch the football game. Okay, the little kids at the table get in a food fight. Okay, the Jell-O, or what do they call it, that wiggly stuff, the cranberry sauce. You're carrying it out, falls on the floor, the dog eats it. Okay, we have a wonderful time, don't we? In theory, we do. Then I talk about Pearl Harbor, and then it's all about family, and then I talk about a month of Christmas dishes. Okay, and I won't read it, but I love dishes. He can tell you, can't you? He can tell you. I love dishes, okay? I live alone. I never entertain. I make it a point to never entertain. It's too much trouble, okay? You got to cook, you got to clean. I have a friend coming over tomorrow, and I've been working for days trying to get the joint cleaned up. The dust, things that you would never do if nobody was coming. You dust in the corners, like nobody's going to see it, okay? But I love dishes. So anyway, we stopped at a garage sale one time when there was this set of Bavarian dishes, okay, like service for 14. That's what I called it, service for 14. I thought, I got to get that. It was only $35. So he says, you're crazy. You don't need any more dishes, But I love them. And it was cheap, okay? I'm a cheap date, half a glass of wine and some dishes, and I'm happy. Okay? So I write this story about these, okay, because I kind of got it from my aunt, who always had a fancy table. She lived in Detroit, the big city, never had any kids, so everything could be pristine, So I buy all these, and I put them all, and then I went on eBay until I had a complete service for 14, because I had 19 cups, okay, of one kind, and maybe 15 saucers. Okay, and I had a gravy boat, all this stuff. So I had a service for 14 I have. And so I put them away, and everything's nice, and this, that, and the other, and I said, well, I have Christmas dishes, too, a couple sets of Christmas dishes. But I said, when the holidays come, what do I get out? I get out my paper plates. It's hard to put soup in a paper plate, but if you get the bowls, you're all set. So that's my service for 14. This is the one I wanted to read, okay, and then maybe I'll read one more, and that'll be it for you. You guys have been real good. It's almost Christmas. In a few more months, it'll be Christmas, right? This is a plug. This is a really cheap gift. If you know somebody who's, ailing or, unhappy or whatever, this will make them smile. And for $10, it'll make you smile too. If they won't have any idea what you paid for it, because I won't tell. What's Christmas without fruitcake? Say what you will, but I like fruitcake. My version, anyway. I ignore all the candied, sticky peel and go straight for dates and nuts. I drench them with frozen orange juice and a good amount of amaretto and let everything mingle overnight. In the morning, I get out my heavy-duty KitchenAid mixer and combine the best non-GMO ingredients